I was assigned to study a species so primitive that my superiors barely considered it worth the ink to sign the order. Observation of Homo sapiens. The decree read, as though that would impress anyone. I was told they live on a small blue planet covered in liquid, fueled by fire, superstition, and something they call caffeine. You can understand why I initially resisted the mission. I had hoped for a noble adversary, some rival intelligence. Instead, I was given humans. On approach, the first thing I noticed was their strange obsession with glowing rectangles. They carry them everywhere, gazing at them as if worshiping a god. On these devices, they watch endless performances called reality television. Imagine, they record themselves eating insects, betraying one another, and failing to sing. Then they broadcast it to the entire tribe. My crew watched for 2 cycles, fascinated, though I personally felt my neural clusters decaying. One program had humans shouting, "You are the weakest link," over and over again. It was unclear who the weakest link actually was, though I began to suspect the entire species. Their sustenance habits are even less dignified. They ingest small wrapped bricks filled with salt, grease, and chemicals they proudly label microwave burritos. The concept of willingly mutating one's own insides seemed a poor survival strategy. Yet they thrive. This is perhaps their greatest mystery. How can such foolishness coexist with persistence? Our mission required the acquisition of a specimen, one human, to be brought aboard for study. We were ordered to select carefully, isolated, unimportant, disposable. I objected to the last word, but the commander clarified. Humans eliminate one another at such a rate that the disappearance of a single individual rarely matters. Wars, traffic accidents, poor dietary choices, it all ensures a steady supply of vacancies. Their numbers are both their shield and their tragedy. I was to lead the expedition personally. Imagine, the great architect of a Zeth dominion reduced to plucking a mammal from the mud. Yet orders are orders, and if nothing else, this would be amusing. We descended under night's cover. The target was located near a flowing body of water, surrounded by trees. Alone, no family, no witnesses. He was engaged in the absurd ritual humans call camping, where they abandon their shelters to sleep in the dirt, building fires as though they had never discovered electricity. He sat by the flames, staring at them with a peculiar stillness. My officers laughed at the sight, one remarking, "Behold, the primitive guardian of glowing sticks." I nearly joined in. The paralysis beam was activated. The human stiffened, his eyes widened, and then his body fell limp. I thought he might have died, but no, our instruments confirmed stable life signs. We hovered above him, our craft invisible to any curious eyes, though there were none to be found. We lifted him effortlessly, his limbs dangling, his fire dwindling to ash below. A simple catch, a dull exercise. My junior officers celebrated as though victory had been achieved. They cheered at the ease, forgetting this was not combat, but collection. I reminded them, you do not applaud the trapping of a mouse. Still, their joy was irritatingly contagious, and I allowed myself a smile. If humans were all like this one, quiet, defenseless, our study would indeed be a short endeavor. On the way back to the ship, I reviewed the specimen's appearance. Male, perhaps mid-30s, muscular build but not excessive. His clothing was simple, a jacket, trousers, boots. A backpack rested near his fire, filled with rope, small blades, and a box labeled duct tape. My officers found it hilarious. Adhesive cloth? Their mighty tool of survival? I instructed them to secure it for analysis. One never knows when the ridiculous becomes relevant. Inside the vessel, the human was placed in containment. His chest rose and fell slowly, the beam holding him in stasis. We examined him. One officer touched the subject's hand, remarking how soft their skin was, as though they had evolved solely for comfort rather than endurance. Another speculated that their emotional volatility, rage, fear, attachment, might be their only unique trait. I considered this and found it plausible. As I recorded my observations, something strange occurred. The human's lips twitched, not fully, not a grimace or gasp. A faint motion, a smile, small and deliberate, carved across his face. The others did not see it. They were laughing, discussing what questions they might ask once he awoke. Would he beg for freedom? Would he cry? Would he call for his mother? I said nothing. I stared at that smile and felt, though I'm ashamed to admit it, the faintest chill along my neural spine. Perhaps it was an involuntary reaction, a muscle spasm. That was the logical conclusion. Yet the timing unsettled me. He had no reason to smile. He was paralyzed, abducted, carried across the sky by beings beyond his comprehension. The natural response is terror. But this human smiled, and not in ignorance. There was awareness in it, though faint, as though he knew more than he should. I dismissed the thought, of course. A single twitch of lips does not overturn an entire analysis. Humans are primitive bipeds. They burn plants for warmth, consume grease for sustenance, and worship glowing rectangles. They are incapable of threat, incapable of subtlety. I convinced myself of this as we secured him further, as the chamber doors sealed, as my officers chattered about their plans for dissection, interrogation, cataloging. Still, as I left the containment chamber, I looked back one last time. His face rested in shadows, but I thought I saw it again, the barest curve of amusement. I told myself I imagined it. After all, what could a human possibly find amusing in such circumstances? I returned to my quarters, drafted the report, and closed with the words, "Specimen acquisition complete." Subject docile. No resistance. And yet, even as I wrote those words, the image returned, the flicker of a smile in the dark. It should have meant nothing, but it lingered, as though the subject had whispered a secret without sound. That was the moment I first felt it, the smallest hairline fracture in my certainty. He awoke far too soon. By our calculations, the paralysis beam should have held him unconscious for 12 standard hours. It lasted less than 2. I was still reviewing reports when an officer screamed across the chamber. The specimen's eyes were open. Not panicked, not darting about in fear. Calm, focused. He regarded us as one might regard a room of insects, curious but not alarmed. We surrounded him immediately, prepared to reinforce restraints, but he did not thrash or shout. He simply lay there, then tilted his head slightly, studying each of us. His lips parted, and with deliberate clarity he asked, "So, who's in charge here?" His voice was steady, casual, as though he were inquiring about the waiter at a restaurant. The arrogance of it startled the crew, but more than that, it unsettled me. He should not have been speaking yet. He should not even have been conscious. I stepped forward, cloaking my unease in formality. "I am the overseer of this operation. You are aboard a vessel beyond your comprehension. Remain silent." It was a standard introduction, rehearsed countless times for lesser species. He did not remain silent. Instead, he smiled again, that same faint curve of amusement I had witnessed before, and said, "Bureaucrat, then? Paperwork kind of guy. Figures." My chest tightened. He had identified my role with startling precision. Perhaps it was guesswork, but his tone carried certainty. He turned his gaze to the officer nearest him and spoke again. "Soldier, you've been itching to put your hands on a weapon since I opened my eyes. And he shifted to our lead technician, scientist. Analytical, not much for jokes. He was correct. Perfectly correct. The officer stammered, demanding how he knew, but the human ignored him and returned his eyes to me. "This isn't your first abduction," he said softly, "but it might be your last." The chamber fell silent. I forced a laugh, too sharp, too forced. "You presume much for a creature so easily taken." He chuckled in return, low and unhurried. "Easily taken? Maybe. But do you know how noisy your dampeners are?" I was awake the whole trip. Counted rotations. Rough estimate. 42 degrees yaw, 800 kilometers altitude before you broke orbit. Not bad tech. Clunky though. I froze. My crew exchanged anxious glances. No human should be able to perceive such details under paralysis. No human should even know the word yaw. Yet he spoke as if reviewing a casual commute. My mind raced for explanations. Chance guesses, improbable coincidence, or some error in our medical scans. but his eyes, sharp, calculating, disturbingly calm, told me it was deliberate. Primitive, I told myself. Do not let him rattle you. I barked for the scientist to begin the neurological scans. We would confirm his inferiority with data, facts, measurable proof. The human leaned back without resistance, almost too cooperative, watching the machines were above him. You're going to scan my brain now, right? Measure my impulses, plot my fears. Go ahead, but don't be surprised when your readings look funny. The technician activated the beam. Patterns blossomed across the display, neural activity rendered in vivid waves. And then silence. The room hushed. The readings were not what we expected. Too strong, too intricate. His cortical density registered anomalously high. His response times spiked beyond our projections. The technician adjusted settings, recalibrated. The data only grew stranger. His brain appeared less like a mammal's and more like a shifting interference pattern, dense with unpredictability. The human chuckled again. See? Funny, right? Don't worry, you'll get used to it. He tilted his head toward one of the hidden cameras mounted near the ceiling. Wave to the folks back home. My spine stiffened. He had identified the cameras. He knew their locations without once looking directly at them. I demanded, "How do you know this?" He smirked. Trade secret. Let's just say I've spent a career breaking into secure places and watching people who didn't know they were being watched. He paused, studying our unease. Ex-military. Navy SEALs. Ring any bells? The word meant little to most of my officers, but I had reviewed the archives. Their so-called SEALs were specialists, trained in secrecy, sabotage, endurance. Elite by human standards, though still crude compared to our forces. It's something about the way he delivered it, calm, assured, almost playful, made my thoughts stumble. He continued, tone light, but words heavy. These days I do consulting, security testing, counterintelligence. Fancy phrase for poking holes in systems and seeing how fast they leak. Yours is leaking already. One officer snarled, stepping forward with weapon raised. I stopped him with a glance. The human did not flinch. He only smiled, teeth glinting faintly in the chamber light. You don't get it, do you? I wasn't asleep the whole time. I listened. I watched. I learned. And I've already sent a message. The phrase landed like a strike. Already sent. Past tense. My mind clawed for answers. Our communications were shielded, locked, encrypted beyond human capacity. Yet he said it with such confidence, as though the act were complete. I felt the first real crack of fear in my arrogance. Impossible. I hissed, but my voice lacked strength. He leaned forward against the restraints, eyes narrowing in focus. That's what everyone says, right up until it isn't. The technician whispered, his vitals, they aren't matching stress indicators. He should be terrified. Instead, it's like he's amused. I demanded further analysis, desperate to reassert control, but the human only leaned back once more, eyes half closed as though resting. You can run your tests. Keep poking. Just remember, you're not the only ones watching. The chamber seemed to shrink around me. Every crew member avoided my gaze, waiting for orders, but none came. For the first time in my career, I hesitated. This was supposed to be a routine abduction, a harmless study of a primitive biped. Instead, I faced a man who smiled in the dark, woke too early, and spoke with the calm certainty of someone far less trapped than we imagined. I turned to leave, desperate to recover composure, but before the door sealed, his voice reached me again, quiet and deliberate. Ever heard of poker? Bluffing game. I'm good at it. The door closed, but the words stayed. Bluff or truth. My mind would not decide. All I knew was that confidence no longer belonged to me. The chamber lights flickered when the testing resumed, a brief pulse that my officers dismissed as routine fluctuation, but I felt the unease gnawing deeper. The human's presence had shifted something intangible. He reclined against the restraints like a man lounging in a chair he had chosen rather than one forced upon him. I wanted to sneer at the arrogance, but I could not. His composure unsettled me. The technician recalibrated the scanners, desperate to prove the previous readings were anomalies. The beam swept across the man's skull, mapping neural activity into bright projections. Once again, the patterns flared. Intricate, unstable, disturbingly complex. My officers leaned closer, whispering among themselves. "It cannot be correct," one muttered. "No mammal possesses such density." The human opened one eye and smirked. "Dense, huh? Heard that before. Usually from ex-girlfriends." He closed the eye again, as though the scan were nothing but a minor annoyance. His humor irritated me more than his data. Jokes, sarcasm, frivolity, this was supposed to be panic, not performance. Yet every quip drew my crew further from confidence. I stepped forward, determined to reassert control. "You are an anomaly among your kind. Nothing more. A curious outlier." He tilted his head, feigning consideration, then spoke with disarming calm. "Or maybe I'm just the one you happen to pick up. Roll of the dice. If that's true, you should be very worried about the rest of us." The words cracked across the room like a strike. Even I could not mask the shiver down my neural spine. He spoke not with bravado but certainty, as if his species concealed depths we had ignored. I reminded myself that Earth was chaotic, violent, addicted to glowing screens and processed food. Yet his confidence infected the air, and doubt coiled in my mind. We began psychological probing. Standard procedure. Imagery designed to trigger fear, confusion, despair. For most subjects, the process dismantled resistance within minutes. He regarded each stimulus with unnerving detachment. Images of destruction earned a yawn. Simulations of drowning drew a casual remark. "You could have used better special effects. Seen scarier movies on late-night cable." I demanded he answer seriously. He raised an eyebrow. "Serious? You abduct a guy from a campsite, strap him to a chair, beam cartoons into his brain, and you want serious? Buddy, this is the funniest thing that's happened to me all year." My officers exchanged nervous glances. His levity eroded their resolve. I pressed harder, amplifying the stimuli, but he only spoke louder. "Tell me something. Why the cameras? Every angle covered. You think I don't notice the hum when the lenses adjust? You got a blind spot behind panel 6, by the way. Rookie mistake." The scientist stammered, demanding how he knew. The human smile widened. "I've spent years in rooms like this. Different paint, different captors, same cameras. You'd be amazed what you can learn by just watching people who think they're watching you." I felt my arrogance thinning like old fabric. "Enough," I snapped, though my voice cracked slightly. "You will answer questions when asked." He laughed. "Already have. You're just not asking the right ones." The technician hesitated, then attempted a deeper neural probe. The machine whined, struggling against unexpected interference. Data surged, unreadable, as though his brain refused to settle into patterns we understood. The technician reported irregularities, terms like feedback loop and counterresonance. I heard only one truth. Our tools could not contain him. The man opened both eyes now, gaze sharp, predatory. "Your equipment's good," he said. "Not great. Little too chatty. Every signal leaks if you know how to listen." And I listened, picked up more than you wanted. I demanded clarity, though dread twisted through me. He leaned closer, voice low. "I know how your ship breathes. I know how your power cycles. I know where your fail-safes sit, and which ones don't actually fail safe. And you gave it all to me with your little flashlight." My breath caught. The room spun with whispered fear. He should not understand any of this. He should be overwhelmed, reduced, broken. Instead, he dissected us with words alone. He stretched slightly against the restraints, not to escape, but to emphasize comfort. "I did a lot of training," he continued, tone almost conversational. "Military first, then counterintelligence. My job was to find weaknesses, break into systems, expose flaws. Some call it red teaming. Pretend to be the bad guy, so you know how to stop the bad guy. Turns out, pretending isn't so hard once you get good at it." One officer barked that he was lying. The man chuckled. "Sure, maybe I am. But ask yourself, if I am lying, why are your instruments melting down?" The technician confirmed system instability. The probe registered erratic spikes, code fragments appearing in places no code should exist, as though his mind were rewriting the machine from within. The possibility was absurd, impossible. And yet, the impossible unfolded before us. I forced steadiness into my voice. You are nothing more than a clever animal. He grinned, teeth bared. Funny. You don't look like you believe that. The words cut deeper than they should have. My authority felt brittle. Every sentence another crack. Still I persisted. Even if you were extraordinary, your kind remains primitive. You have no reach beyond your dirt and oceans. His grin softened into something colder. You think that because it's what we wanted you to think. Easier to play dumb. Easier to let you underestimate. But the truth? You're late to the game. A silence thicker than space itself filled the chamber. My crew looked to me for denial, but I could provide none. The human leaned back again, voice quieter but heavier with intent. And if you don't believe me, don't worry. I've already sent a message. The phrase returned, now like a blade against the skin. Already sent. Past tense. Final. My mind screamed at the impossibility, but my body betrayed me. I trembled. The technician confirmed minor system anomalies spreading beyond the probe. Lights dimmed, consoles flickered. The man closed his eyes as though resting. Don't panic yet. Panic comes later. I stood frozen, my arrogance bleeding out into the void, replaced by a growing fear I could not suppress. He had not raised a hand, not strained against the restraints. Yet he had seized the chamber with nothing but words and presence. For the first time in this mission, I understood the true conflict. It was not between my dominion and a primitive world. It was between certainty and the quiet, unshakable smile of one man who knew too much. The lights flickered again, brighter this time, and every console beeped in warning. The human whispered, eyes still closed, showtime. The alarms began as a whisper, faint beeps threading through the chamber like insects. At first my officers dismissed them, claiming interference from the probe. But the sound grew sharper, multiplying, until the walls pulsed with red light. Gravity faltered, stuttered, and then collapsed. My crew tumbled upward in graceless spirals, flailing against the air. Only the human remained anchored, secure by the restraints we had so proudly applied. He appeared comfortable, grounded while the rest of us drifted helplessly. He opened his eyes, calm and bright. That'll be your stabilizers seizing up. Little feedback loop. You should get that checked. His tone was casual, as though critiquing plumbing rather than sabotaging a warship. My officers screamed orders, clawed at controls, but nothing responded. Doors sealed without command. Lights flickered in erratic strobe, and the ship's own voice, the artificial intelligence that had guided us faithfully, fell silent. I fought against the absence of weight, clawing back to a console. The screen blared static, then words appeared, not in our language, but in his. Access granted. My chest hollowed. No human should be capable of infiltrating our systems. They lack the knowledge, the means, the architecture. Yet here it was undeniable, printed across the screen with mocking clarity. The human chuckled, soft and unnerving. You gave me the keys yourselves. That scanning beam of yours? Two-way street. You wanted to read me, but you never thought about what I might be reading from you. He tilted his head, studying my paralysis with a trace of pity. Funny thing about arrogance, it blinds faster than any weapon. An officer screamed, thrashing toward him with weapon drawn. The door to the chamber sealed before he could fire. We were trapped together, predators reduced to prey by the very creature we had mocked. The human shifted slightly, testing the restraints with subtle pushes. They groaned in protest, not breaking but bending, and that sound filled me with a dread greater than any enemy fleet. He spoke again, voice low. You ever hear of duct tape? Course you haven't. Sticky cloth. Holds anything. Fixes everything. Soldiers joke it could hold the universe together if you had enough of it. You'd laugh, but I've seen it stop a leak in a submarine at 300 feet. Your tech's prettier, sure, but prettier isn't always better. The reference made no sense, yet it carried weight. My crew looked to me for guidance, but I had none. I was the overseer, the architect, the authority, and I could offer nothing but silence. The ship groaned as bulkheads shifted. Lights died one by one. The human continued, voice carrying through the darkness. You think Earth is behind. That's cute. Truth is, we got good at pretending. Easier to let people underestimate you. Easier to let them think they're the smartest in the room. Meanwhile, we watch. We listen. We prepare. I clung to the console, desperate for control, but every command returned the same human phrase: denied. My own ship refused me. He had turned our intelligence against us with nothing but proximity. He leaned forward now, restraints straining as though eager to fail. His face caught in the dim glow, expression unreadable. We got satellites you can't see, monitors you can't track, defense nets buried so deep you'd think they were myths. You think you were the hunters. You were just the warm-up act. One officer whispered prayers. Another screamed curses. I only stared, my arrogance crumbling into ash. He had not raised his voice, had not thrashed or threatened. Yet I knew, we all knew, we were undone. The systems crashed fully then. Silence swallowed us, broken only by his breathing. He closed his eyes once more and whispered a phrase we did not understand. Florida man. I recorded it, though its meaning escaped me. He chuckled softly at his own words, then added, we thought he was an outlier. Turns out, he was a preview. Terror constricted my chest. If this was preview, what was the main spectacle? My crew clung to the walls, wide-eyed, awaiting orders I could not give. The human, still bound, radiated control. Finally, I forced myself to speak. What do you want? The question shamed me, but silence would have shamed me more. He opened his eyes, calm as still water. Want? Not much. Just a fair fight. Just acknowledgement that we're not what you think we are. And maybe, just maybe, that you stop treating us like mice in a maze. I whispered that it was impossible, that a species was backward, that we had seen their wars, their chaos, their glowing rectangles of distraction. He smiled faintly. Exactly. You saw what we wanted you to see. Ever heard of misdirection? Magicians use it. While you're laughing at the left hand, the right hand's already picked your pocket. The truth settled like stone. We had been fooled not by power, but by performance. Their wars, their foolishness, their burritos and emojis, they had been camouflage. The realization cracked through me with finality. Earth was not primitive. It was patient. Gravity returned suddenly, slamming us all to the floor. I gasped, my body aching. My officers groaned, struggling upright. The human remained bound, though the restraints now whined under the strain of some unseen command. He tilted his head, gaze sharp. Game's over. I staggered closer, trembling. If Earth is what you say, then what becomes of us? He studied me in silence, then answered with chilling simplicity. That depends how scared you are when you get home. The restraints snapped open with a hiss, metal peeling like softened wax. He stood slowly, stretching, as though waking from a nap. None of us moved. We were paralyzed by fear more complete than any beam could inflict. He approached the sealed door, placed a hand against it, and the panel slid open at his touch. Systems that had ignored us bent obediently to him. He glanced back once, expression unreadable. Ever heard of Chuck Norris? He asked softly. None of us answered. He smiled without humor. Yeah, didn't think so. He stepped into the corridor, the door sealing behind him. We remained in the chamber, shivering in silence. Our authority dissolved. For the first time in my long career, I understood what it meant to be prey. I replayed his words, every phrase carved into memory. Already sent a message. If it was true, then Earth was not simply aware of us. It was prepared for us. And if it was a bluff, then perhaps bluffing itself was the most terrifying weapon of all. I sat on the cold floor, arrogance stripped away, and whispered to no one. We came as gods. We leave as fools. The image of his smile lingered, eternal, and I could not banish it.